Bonjour, hi, I'm Ingrid Bejerman, and as you know, I am in charge of the Azul program here at Blue Metropolis, meaning literature in Spanish and Portuguese. We're the world's first multilingual festival, and anyway, part of what we do is talk about translation and talk about multilingualism in many languages. And it's my pleasure to be here today with Sandra Tamele, direct from Montreal to Mozambique or to Maputo, who is the director of Editora Trinta Zero Nove, based in Maputo, Mozambique, although I've never seen her there or here. We meet somehow in Europe, in Frankfurt, and yeah, I think it was in Frankfurt. We've seen each other twice, but it feels like longer. You know, these people that you feel like have always been. I mean, when once you bring the books back with you, they're part of your life. You know, so anyway, we're going to be talking about the wonderful work that Sandra does, how she began. You know, Sandra, very quickly. You know, if you want us to introduce if you want to please introduce yourself in terms of like your practice, because Sandra has training as an architect. You know, which is really interesting. How does an architect come to be the architect of books? You know, so tell us about you, Sandra, a little bit, and then about your work.
Thank you for this invitation, Ingrid. It's always a pleasure to present this ambitious project to the world. So as you said, my name is Sandra Tamele. I'm based in Maputo, Mozambique. And yes, I have a very funny story. So coming from a multilingual family, I think that translation and the love of languages was always present in my household from a very, very young age. So I do have a degree in architecture and town planning, but it's still a male-dominated field, and I just couldn't fit in. Being a very ambitious woman, I decided to pursue my second career, that's translation. And shortly after establishing myself as a language services provider, I went back to books. So I said, okay, if I have this advantage, I can speak several languages, I can read from at least 5. So why not bring some of this literature? Because something that happens in Mozambique is that we have 5, that's not so to speak, but we only have 5 bookshops in the capital city. Then we have 1 or 2 in the central region, and then another one in the northern region. So there's no book infrastructure, there's no book circulation, so that's a shame. And I said, okay, if I can use my skills to bring current books, interesting books, relatable books to Mozambique, why not do it? So in 2007, I did my first literary project. It was published by Ingrid. It wasn't easy. And it was quite frustrating having this book. It's internationally acclaimed, but nobody cared about it in my country. So fast forward 10 years, I said, okay, let's do a literary translation competition. This to bring focus to the profession, because we are often the invisible women. And my idea to do this was through a competition where I challenge young professional or not translators to pick a text and then bring it to their mother tongue. And this grew from year to year. We had literally 3 entrants in the first year, but then it grew. We had over 300 entrants last year, and we won.
That's so many, Sandra. Sorry to interrupt, but this one is from the 2019 edition, the one that I showed, right? This is a 2019 selection.
Exactly.
So you publish it in the same year, like it says, because it was a translation of 2019. Well, I mean, you publish it, right?
Yes.
We do. This would be the 3rd volume in the collection, because it's the only.
It is. That's number 3.
Number 3, and you're around number 6 or 7 now, right?
6.
6. Perfect.
Because it happens that the first 3 years of the competition, we didn't have a publication for the same reason. I was knocking doors, pitching these projects, but nobody took translation seriously. So the next step for me was to establish a translation publisher. So that's how Trinta Zero Nove came to be. Trinta Zero Nove is inspired on September 30th. That's International Translation Day. So from there, we publish every year 1 volume with the winning stories, the winning translations, I mean. And it grew from one language, target language, into 5 right now. So we are trying to reach, because I don't know if you know, Mozambique has 42 spoken languages and 1 sign language. So we were trying slowly to cover all of them.
That's so impressive. I mean, again, ambition doesn't begin to cut it, you know. And so you mentioned many languages. I mean, you yourself at work and at least 5 speak and understand more. Tell us a little bit about your languages and the languages of Trinta Zero Nove, you know, the ones that you're working with, because obviously you can't start with all 42 or 49, you said.
42.
42. And also I know the sign language here because, well, the sign language in this book also has, it's Braille, this part, right? That is,
exactly.
Yeah, because it has, I didn't want to open it because it's white and I don't have my CD player and I you know, so I left it like that because I love the object itself for the audiobook, but yeah, so it has a Braille, like, yeah. Here.
Exactly. Because when I set up Trinta Zero Nove, I wanted to be more than a publisher. So as I mentioned, I'm a very ambitious woman. So the idea behind this was, number one, to provide a book that would be affordable, because you have to think that 50% of Mozambicans, we had 31 million, live under the line of poverty. So if you're making books a luxury item, you're not going to go far. So the first item was to make books affordable. Then we propose narratives that are very current and very relatable. So we choose mostly female authors. We choose mostly Black authors. You would say, but why is that relevant if Mozambique is 90+% Black? But there's still a lot of ingrained racism, and we did more post-independence to keep the status quo that we had during the Portuguese regime. So that's the another thing that we're doing. And then we also do the LGBT community. We publish them to raise the awareness about their rights. And last but not least, people with disabilities. So we publish authors with disabilities, we publish stories of people with disabilities, and we make those books accessible. So you're showing it's an audiobook. It's quite relevant in our market because 39% of the population is illiterate. So that's the way I think that being illiterate doesn't mean that you don't care about literature. So by providing books in that format, we believe that we are broadening the reach of literature. And your question was about languages. My mother tongue is Portuguese.
Sorry, it was a lot about languages, but we opened so many Venn diagrams here of intersections, you know, of accessibility, because very much just to reiterate why this is so important to have you here and to help spread the word. We're very proud. I think in Canada, this is your first interview, you know, I think, you know, because, oh my God, now I'm the one that has to hang up my phone's ring. Because we are a foundation that uses reading and writing to overcome poverty, you know, even though we think of Canada not as Mozambique in terms of, there's quite a lot of poverty here as well. There's a lot of disenfranchised people that need to be integrated, but the point is to use the pleasures of reading and writing as a mission of our foundation to overcome inequity, also inequality, inequity, and to bring people together, you know. So anyway, Sandra, let's go with the languages, and then we come back with accessibility, openness, you know, lines of editorial lines, everything. So tell us a little bit about the languages.
Okay, and about what you were just saying about books being the how do you say, the key for social ascension. I'm the success story here in Mozambique, because if you look back in my family, both my grandmothers were illiterate and they were child brides. So here I am, a Black woman with a master's degree, running her own company, and now interacting with Canada online. This would be impossible without books in my life. So that's definitely a good focus for your foundation, and I wish that we can build bridges around that. So going back to languages, my mother tongue is Portuguese because I was born in a mixed family in terms of my father is Machangana from a very patriarchal society in the southern part of Mozambique, and my mom comes from the northern part from a matrilineal background, and they don't speak the same language. My mother speaks Kimwan, spoken by around 3% of the population. When my father speaks Shangana, that's spoken by 11%. So this clash of cultures at the same time represents the history of Mozambique, because post-independence, when you look at 42 languages, so which one will be our official language? So the government opted for Portuguese, and the children of my generation, they were raised with Portuguese as their mother tongue. But the thing is, there was this environment around us. So mom was translating what dad was saying. So I think that this built in me this easiness to learn and very fast new languages. And then I taught myself English, then I learned Italian, German, tried to do a little bit of Mandarin. I can understand most of the Romance languages in literature. So that's why Trinta Zero Nove started with the 5. I think it's German, Spanish, English, French, and Italian. We translated them into Portuguese, but then I realized that only 11% of Mozambicans are proficient in Portuguese, the official language. So from the 42, we had to look those with most speakers. So we have Makua for the northern region, because most of the Bantu languages are mutually intelligible. So if we pick Makua for the northern region, Sena for the central, and Xangana for the southern, we can cover the entire country with these translations. But then in the competition, we have these 300 entrants, and they have all of the 42 mother tongues. So that's why we have published also Shitswa, Bitonga, and another minority languages, and it's quite an exciting exercise. And we've been translating children's books from Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, into the 3 languages, Sena, Makua, and Xangana. It's challenging, but we are doing it.
Oh, no doubt about it. You are. It's extremely impressive. And I've just seen, just not only have you started this, but there was also the pandemic, but even in the last, I was just thinking, because why does it feel like I've seen you much more than only 2 times in Frankfurt? It's because I also think your online presence is very, very strong, and you connect very well with, well, I mean, it's not about quantity, it's about quality, right? It's the people that, well, I always say, it's like, it's not about the 20,000 likes. It's like, look at the people that are liking this. It's a difference, because you recognize that, I mean, the names, and that's, and I would say in that sense, you're like working with the top of the top, and I was just wondering, I mean, which is, quite impressive given, given the short time, relatively speaking, since everything began and since you took it here. So Sandra, tell us a little bit about now, especially that now with as we're exiting the pandemic, what your routine is in terms of your calendar, in terms of the book fairs and events that you attend. How do you connect around the world? From that, what I followed, obviously you've been to Brazil, you've been to, but you haven't yet been to North America, maybe, or not, or at least not to Montreal. I mean, that's tell us a little bit about when you plan on on conquering our side of the public.
Yes, not to Montreal yet. I think I went to the Breadloaf campus when I was just a translator, not the founder of Trinta Zero Nove. So that was in 2019. And it's quite interesting being micro publisher born just 6 months before the pandemic. I think that the upside of COVID-19 was that everybody was listening. We were Zooming, and that was really important, that links were established. People were open to listen to the Global South and understand that there is this potential to exchange, because I think that there is historically a vision of Africa that is, oh no, we have to aid Africa. Not that's not true, but Africa has also the potential of being a market. So I'm coming to you to purchase translation rights. So I'm publishing books from all over the world. Yes, I have attended several book fairs. I'm lucky enough to have been invited, because that's crucial. Without fellowships or invitation programs, it would be impossible for me to attend those events, and they are very, very important, because that's where I met Lawrence, that's where I met you, and those linkages are invaluable. Let me tell, they're invaluable, and
those are things, as Lawrence, if he were here, would say also, that that doesn't happen online, because a lot of it is serendipity, is walking around the hallways and people, you being at the right place at the right time, or like Oprah said, preparation meets opportunity, but that's when it happens, you're prepared and here comes the opportunity,
Definitely.
I was personally very excited because when you think of Mozambique, you think of Mia Couto, you think of like the big Nobel, contenders, but you start, but this is so impressive to think of small efforts that are so successful and that are like just the vision that you have is quite exciting to hear. But anyway, Sandra, I don't want to interrupt. Tell us a little bit more about the importance of the fellowships. And again, it's an opportunity also to thank the institutions for not only to thank them, but to highlight the importance of this type of thing, right?
Definitely. And you mentioned Mia Couto. You have to notice that he's blonde and blue-eyed.
Of course.
So he represents 2% of Mozambicans. He's the most international author. We have the most translated one, but we have so much more potential. And we have to give other authors the same chance that Couto had. And I think this is the moment, and I may be one of the key players doing that, because that's the power of a translator. We love this author, then we translate a sample, then we go and pitch. That's what I did in
but a translator and entrepreneur, right, Sandra? I want to emphasize that also for me. What's even more interesting for you is like this aspect, that I think is interesting for cultural managers in general, people that aren't necessarily publishers but are watching your work, is all the connections that you draw between these practices and the opportunities that you see by connecting different markets, different possibilities. Because the nature of a translator, one would think, is quite solitary. You're sitting there with a dictionary, like the act itself, but then the going out into the world and pitching and seeing, even for example, making editorial decisions of which books to curate and all of that, right, Sandra? So tell us a little bit also about about those decisions in terms of the publications. When you mentioned a little bit, they have to do with the contest, or not the contest, but like the slam or the translation competition. And then tell us a little bit more about the other kind of content, the content in general that you produce, and where you envision also not just what's happening, but what you can share with us about the future.
Okay, so we started with the competition, but then I said, okay, if we have this business set up, so let's not stop there. That would be one publication per year. So we had now novel, a nonfiction, a children's, and poetry collection. So when I find someone, I think that the main key for me to decide to invest in such a project is the voice different from what we have in Mozambique. For instance, we published Raymond Antrobus. He is a deaf poet from the UK. So I had never seen poetry like that, a mix of sign language and the way he is also an activist, because I think there's no way you can be a writer or a translator and not embrace a cause for you to be an activist for. So that's what I love. And another criteria, like I said, is if it is writer from a underrepresented, disenfranchised background. So that's something that I do, because like I said, I'm trying to present my readers with relatable stories. And also if I have a narrative that is by a woman, so because what you ask, why women, Sandra? In Mozambique, you don't see female authors being published. If you see a book out, it's a self-published project. It's sometimes lacks the professional side of things. That's why I bring female voices. So I try to inspire young female Mozambicans to write. And actually, we have a project now that will run in April, because on April 7 is Mozambican Women's Day. So we'll host a series of workshops with young female debut authors, and then we'll publish the best of them. So 7 voices that will be translated in 4 Mozambican languages. And we just finished our first ever children's book that is from Mozambique by Trinta Zero Nove. So I'm really, really excited. It's by a doctor. She's a humanist. So she writes about how children should be taught how to be human from a very, very young age. And I think that this resonates with the project of Trinta Zero Nove, because we have to understand that we are humans, first of all. We shouldn't see race, color of of skin. We shouldn't see status, disability, or non-disabled. For instance, we don't have a word in Portuguese for able-bodied. Think about it. So if we focus, so that's one of the projects, and I start talking and then I lose myself, but that's
no, this is very much in line. And no, because again, there's so many possibilities. I mean, I was mentioning because, and things that I want to ask about, because for example, we think from outside, like one of the hottest names in literature right now, speaking of Frankfurt, is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I mean, she's one of the best-selling, figures. I mean, this is what we see, and imagine for young Black women, Black little girls who see this, it's like, obviously they see themselves represented the same way that I see myself in Susan Sontag and Hannah Arendt. I mean, I was saying, but Jewish intellectual women are very represented, and I definitely see myself as that. I understand that completely, of why if you don't see your voice represented, that you don't feel like your voice counts, And but in this, Sandra, for example, you also do some talent scouting, like seeing, for example, we discussed Vivek Shraya here from Canada, that you discovered them in Frankfurt. That it was quite an amazing thing, because Vivek's literature is exactly, or work in general, is exactly along the lines of what you mentioned. She even wants to go beyond lines of gender and color. I just loved her answer to one of the interviews. She's like, I'm South Asian, I'm from India. I bring a different perspective of, I want to escape. I don't even want to speak in these terms. I want to think and expand, outside of these binaries, or outside of this, right, Sandra? So again, so you bring a little bit back, because we're dealing with cultures that are still, for example, and I'm dealing with a student right now, actually, who is from Botswana, and he came out to his family, and his family shunned him, so he has no international financial support here, because homophobia is still very much rampant. I mean, I was saying Brazil at the same time. I mean, look at Bolsonaro, and he's elected by 52 million people, and he's the classic. So we still have a lot of, and literature is a way to change that mentality. I think in that sense, your work is quite, I mean, I'm mentioning on the LGBTQ front, Sandra, because you mentioned that specifically, and Lawrence translate to that, what do you do for that? Tell us a little bit about that level, because the minds, I mean, I think the mentality is much harder to break in certain parts of the world than, say, for example, Montreal or New York, Maputo, and even my hometown, Campinas, yeah.
Now in Maputo is unthinkable. I think most of the LGBT community is still in the closet, because it would be too difficult. If you ask people in my family, they would say, oh, that's so white. Depression is so white. Being gay is so white. And I say, no, we are all humans. We have different sexual preferences. We have different, pronouns that we'll be using, and they should be respected. I met Vivek at my first Frankfurt, and let me tell you, it was mind-blowing. And I wouldn't have met her if it wasn't for Frankfurt. Lawrence is a different instance. He was introduced by a fellow translator, and she said, okay, you have to meet this man is amazing, and he is. Actually, we're going to publish him with the competition, so he will be our source text I'm
learning here as I'm interviewing you, very close friend that I speak to very often, this is really, I mean, because Lawrence comes with something, but that's amazing, I mean, he's winning all kinds of prizes now, so it seems in line with his
he's
success
amazing. So he will be our source author this year for the translation competition. Hopefully he will be here in Maputo for the celebration, and we'll also publish his Rainbow Family Children's, it's a board book, but we'll have a different approach to it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because the format of that book seems a little bit more expensive or more costly to print, right? So you're going to adapt it to your public and market.
We have to, because as I said, I'm a micro publisher. I'm still self-funded, so I have to be very conscious and cautious about budget. That's why I say that fellowships and invitation programs are key, so that I don't spend money that I should use to print a book into traveling. And actually, I was planning a trip to Bologna now, And I said, okay, that's 2,000 books. That's too much. So that's the way I'm thinking right now, that any expense, it's compared to how many books you can get out with that
Yes,
amount
I mean,
of.
you see your currency is the number of books, right? I mean, you change your.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's
So
fascinating, Sandra. That's fascinating. And well, I mean, I would love for you to, come visit us in Montreal at one point, to see, I mean, you already have we met when Canada was guest of honor in Frankfurt. So I think it was quite an interesting introduction to the literature and to the scene. And on that note, well, I want to thank everyone that was here with us watching this interview. Lawrence Schimmel will be at the next Blue Metropolis if you want to catch him. I think Lawrence fits in every one of our tracks because, Jewish, LGBTQ, poet, editor, translator, I mean, everything, we can put him in whatever panel he fits in, and send it again, a pleasure. And I hope to, one day welcome you here in Montreal. But in the meantime, we'll love following you around on social media. I strongly suggest viewers to follow Sandra on Instagram, and because it's quite interesting to see, just the postings themselves. I find they're very artistic because you have the framing, like just the photos are very nicely framed, and I think because again, it's a different thing, but you see the work of the curator behind the scene, because again, I find it interesting because journalists like to look at journalists and editors, and it's a work of editorial curatorship that I find very well done. As from a byline from a journalist being, in the sense, Sandra, it's from her perspective. She's the one, she's also very elegant. Anyway, it's like a Vanity Fair, type of reading. So I really suggest, because it's fun to follow you online. I don't know, it brightens your day. It feels like flipping a magazine, and you just imagine it. You see a picture and it transports you to another part of the world. Where someone is doing something creative or beautiful. At the end of the day, one of the writers that we're bringing to Colombia, Kim Tui, says, I'm here to bring beauty into this world. And I would assume, Sandra, you too, because that's the mission of an architect, be beauty and function, form and function.
That's the duty of a Leo. I think that before I'm an architect, I'm a Leo.
You're a Leo?
And I think that is too. So
it's very consistent. I must say, Garcia Marquez will be blessing this conversation. He took astrology very serious. I'm a Sagittarius, and we're both sign of fire, as so it's very Leo and Sagittarius. Aries not as much, but Leo and Sagittarius get along very well, So
we
anyway. No, I just know because end of September and up until the end of August is like my most birthday, it's one after the other, it's everybody. It's
I know.
Yeah. But anyway, Leo, keep roaring, and no, this is really impressive. Congratulations. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have this conversation with you. And anyway, so thank you.
Thank you for having me, Ingrid. It was a pleasure. And thank you, Met Blue. Hopefully I'll see you in Montreal soon.
Hopefully.